from each happily ever after, every wish upon a star. Let's break down the movies that shaped who we are, from memory lane to now and everything in between. The most famous of films to the ones we've never seen. Decade by decade, all the times we laughed and cried, and with a little pixie dust, they will all take flight, reliving the feelings, and we're trying our very best. And if they mean the same to you, please be our guest. So hop aboard, we would love to have you as we hang with a certain mouth, the whole gang too. If you love nostalgia stuff, we hope this does the trick. Thanks for joining us as we deep dive the magic.
Hi, and welcome back to the Deep Diving the Magic podcast. I'm KJ.
And I'm Jeffrey. And we are back today with the 64th Disney feature-length film from March the 29th, 1963. It is a film called The Miracle of the White Stallions. Miracle of the White Stallions is based on the story of Operation Cowboy. And it is credited as being based on the book The Dancing White Horses of Vienna by Colonel Aloy Podhosky, who is actually the main character of the film. Would you like to start us off with a synopsis or some opening thoughts about The Miracle of the White Stallions?
In 1945, the fate of Vienna's famous Lippenzirner, I probably just butchered that, sorry, Stallions hangs into the balance. American General Patton could save them, but first he seeks to see them perform.
And everything else ensues all around there. Any opening thoughts about the film?
I had never heard of it before we watched it. I had also never heard of this type of horse.
Well, there was a whole battle about it.
There was a whole battle about it. I found it very interesting, though. I didn't hate it.
All right. Well, you want to dive right in?
Sure.
All right. So we start off. We see the Alpine village. They're talking about the white horses that served the crown. We see those horses. They're running in and out of the fields as the credits roll. They're all heading towards a barn, and they wait to be selected for the historic Spanish riding school of Vienna. So it sets up the whole premise right from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. I think they said it was the oldest riding school in the world.
Yes. We then see a Nazi flag. The first time with any Nazi propaganda since Victoria Through Air Power many, many, many films ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that just shows right there that we now know our time frame. We are in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
The Nazi soldiers arrive to talk to the military men of the riding school. And then that's where we learn that some of the younger stallions were moved to Berlin for safety because of the war.
Mm-hmm.
There's a Nazi military man who's very irritated and forces them to continue life as normal, even though much of the staff of the riding school has been moved to the front line of the war.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct? Did I miss anything so far? All right. So the guy in charge of the school, who is the colonel that I was talking about earlier, he's very upset with this. He's very upset that his trainers, like he's stressed. You know, he's put his whole life into this school, into these horses, into this military, and now, you know, things are not looking good for his horses.
Mm-hmm.
He says things like, you know, how can the Nazis be so stupid and they're believing their own ridiculous propaganda?
Mm-hmm.
But so basically he wants to take the school and the horses and leave Vienna, but he can't leave, and his wife won't let him leave as well. Like, he has to continue moving on, like, on the day to day.
Yep.
So the whole, like, riding school military people are, like, having a dinner that night. He gives this big rousing speech. They sing about Schnitzel. It's a whole thing. But then he has to deliver the bad news that some of those men have to go back to the front line because they're needed in the actual war.
Yeah.
But as that night goes on, they then start to hear, like, it's not really an air raid siren, but I guess it's an air raid siren. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like the whole town just starts to, like, blast the alarm
to make sure that they know that bombing's coming.
Yeah. So
it was definitely an air raid siren.
So then we hear, like, gunfire and bombs, and all the horses are panicking. They're trying to bring the stallions to safety. He once again it says that he's going to leave Vienna, but he goes to talk to a guy about getting the horses out, but he gets denied.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy says, like, we already granted you access to like move like art and artifacts out. Like, we have to continue. Like, we can't startle the people. We have to continue the way that things are going.
Yeah, because if you move, they're going to think that there's no chance. So basically, I guess it was to keep morale up in the town, and they didn't want to like freak out the town that something bad's about to happen.
Yeah. So the colonel goes to like the general, who is like his one ally, and the general is like like, I gave you orders before about preserving art and artifacts. Let's just say that these horses are artifacts. Let's get them out. Let's use that loophole. So they,
which I had a problem with some of this.
Okay, so, I had a lot of problem with a lot of this. So let's fine. Go ahead.
They want to keep this horse breed alive because it's the only place that they have these horses, and they moved the mares to Czechoslovakia, and then some of the younger stallions, obviously. And then he kept 70 of the other stallions with him. Why would you move all the mares together? Because later on, like when he was trying to make his case, he was like, hey, like, if we don't get the mares, like, this horse breed will die out. Why would you have not kept some of your mares with some of your stallions so that way you wouldn't risk this? Because what about if they couldn't have done that?
I don't know.
So I was like,
wartime's a stressful time.
Okay, sir, you seem really smart, but this was really a stupid move of yours in the beginning. So I don't know why you wouldn't have kept some of the mares, but anyway.
So he gets
that was my first.
He gets the permission and like the basically like the loophole to get them out.
Loophole permission.
Get them out as their like artifacts. So he makes this like whole brigade of moving horses.
He moved it, and then whenever like I guess a patrolling German platoon finds him when they're on the move, they're like, are you evacuating? And he was like, no, I'm bringing arts and artifacts out like I was told to. Well, why do you have all these extra horses attached to your wagons? Oh, because they're show horses. They're not used to pulling the wagon, so I bought extra horses to switch them out. I was like,
but it worked.
I was like, well, that's cool. Because...
Yep, he shows them the orders and he's allowed to move on.
Yeah.
So they are going to a train station. They arrive at the train station, but they are like, the train station is a hopping place. It's like everybody's trying to get the heck out of there, and you can't blame them. So they get denied rail cars because it's hopeless due to heavy damages. Like the guy said that he has hundreds of orders, and he can't grant any of them. But he's pretty persistent, and he gives the railroad operator a very rousing speech, a very patriotic speech about his kids and about just everything, which ends up gaining him granted access to the requested rail cars. I think it was like 6 or 7 rail cars, to put the horses on. So we are a go. But during the train journey, it is attacked by planes, by warfare, by the Allied forces. And they're like, oh my gosh, it's hopeless. Like, what are we going to do? And the wife's like, well, I'm not leaving, blah, 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 blah. And they're just like laying on the ground of this train car. But then I think it was just kind of like a fire barrage as they were moving. So the planes kept moving. Like they didn't stop. It wasn't a whole warfare thing.
But, so everybody else that just jumped the train is getting back on the train. They went and like hid in like cornfields or something, and then like all of a sudden you see everybody standing up and like running back to the train. I was just like, interesting. But
either way, so it doesn't explain why, but the train has to stop, whether it was for like refueling or whatever.
Yeah.
So like while it's refueling, there's more raid sirens that hear, and the train conductor is like getting orders that like they can't risk another like any losses to any like engines. So like the engine just leaves on its own and like leaves all the other cars behind.
Yeah.
But then the air raid siren stops, so the train conductor comes back, like the train comes back, but then right after that there's another siren and like really like the gunfire this time. So they're like, okay, we have to go. And like the train conductor is getting orders from the general that like, forget these cars, you have to leave, it's an order. But then the colonel goes up to like see what's going on and says like, you can't leave us behind, we have these horses. And the conductor's like, oh, my wife and I saw those horses, like
every time.
I love them. And
every time we would come to Vienna.
He loves the horses, so he ends up defying the orders.
And they're on my train.
Yeah. So he ends up defying the orders and attaching the cars and taking them with him.
As the Trunchbull lady was just like, no.
Yeah, she was very
you have to detach and go.
I mean, she was following orders for sure. Trunchbull.
And he's just like smiling and waving as he takes the horses on.
So they make it to their destination, which is the castle of St. Martin's.
Such a weird looking palace. I thought it was
a castle. It was the castle of St. Martin's.
But originally, I thought they were calling it a palace at one point. And either way, I didn't think it looked anything like a palace or anything like a castle.
It was just called the castle at St. Martin's.
Anyway.
It was like a refugee camp.
Yeah.
So they make it there. They make friends with the lady, the countess.
Yeah.
Whose name I don't know. I didn't write it down. But so they're like life seems to be better that they're at this refugee place. But then other refugees have been like breaking in and stealing like supplies from the riding school, blankets, horse. What's the word for it? Saddles. And they're just, but then they get caught. And whatever, someone steals a gun, there's a whole big thing, but they end up diffusing the situation. But then an army car arrives at St. Martin's, and they're all like, oh no, we have to hide. But then the colonel's like, wait, I know this person, it's the general that helped me earlier. So the general, they meet up, they're all excited, they play the piano. The general tells the colonel that the riding school is still standing, which is big. But then while they're alone before the general leaves, he tells them that the mayor's, basically all the people in Czechoslovakia have been taken prisoners of war, and like that whole area has been destroyed. So like they don't know about the mayors. Is that correct?
Well, the mayors are in danger.
Yeah.
But there was a Hungarian riding school that was captured during that time by the Soviets on the outskirts of Vienna.
Yeah.
And because of their military affiliation with that riding school, I guess riders of the riding school were taken as prisoners of war, and all the horses were destroyed.
Yeah, so like their mayors are in danger.
So he doesn't really know about their mayors, but he told them about the other riding school, and then that's when he was like, and before I leave, I'm gonna basically get rid of the military affiliation with the riding school, so I think you'll stand a better chance as a civilian riding school.
Correct. Yep. So before he leaves,
which I thought it was weird because he did that, and then for the longest time after that, they were still wearing their like uniforms. But then he was like, somebody else pulls up and he's like, we got everybody take off their uniforms, we're gonna burn them.
So we'll get there on that. So before he leaves as a good deed, like you said, he does decide to
demilitarize
to demilitarize, to make them a civil institute, to help them once Germany loses the war, because it doesn't look good. And then the general, sorry, I couldn't think of who was who, makes this whole speech about he doesn't know what's going to happen with his life because he doesn't want to be remembered as a Nazi. And like he's like,
but I don't want to start over.
I don't want to start over. So like that scene ends, and then we see that the colonel is listening to the radio, and they hear that Germany is still not surrendering. There's a Disney rainstorm outside, and then this is where we see like an even bigger group of refugees sneak in and try to ambush the guards with their guns to try to steal the horses to escape.
Mhm.
So they're like, the end is near. We have to get out of here. The refugees are like no longer pretending that they're trying to stay warm. They're just stealing horses now to escape. But then the colonel hears the alarm again, the air raid siren, and oh no, I'm sorry, not the air raid siren. Basically, the guard that's protecting the horses. Sorry, I got my notes mixed up. The guard that's protecting the horses like rings the alarm. So then the colonel runs out there to see like what's going on with the horses, but he's held up at gunpoint by the refugees. But they are able to unarm the refugees and they force them to leave because they end up at this point hearing more gunfire and the war is like getting closer. Does that make sense? Did I jump? No. So
they were just trying to steal the horses so they could get out of there.
Yeah. So
and that's when he told them, he's like, well, the general told me on the way out that this is what's happening and you don't really need to worry. We're not in any danger here.
But then that night, the colonel asks his wife if all this has been worth it. His wife gives him like this big rousing speech about not losing sight. But then at the same time, so like everything looks good. Like his wife gives this whole entire like moving speech about not losing sight, and he's like, okay, the end is near. And then there's a knock at the door of the castle of St. Martin's.
Yeah.
So the lady, the countess, goes to answer the door, and we see that there's a German military officer who's looking for the colonel. The officer has orders that because the colonel is the highest ranking officer currently in the military, he will become the defense area commander because his decommission paperwork hasn't gone through yet. And the guy tells him that any thought of surrender will be deeply punished.
Yeah.
Did I jump ahead? Did I miss anything? So basically, he got decommissioned by the other guy, but it hasn't gone through yet because they're not traveling very fast here. He is now the defense area commander because he's the highest ranking person, and he has no say in the matter whatsoever. So then after that German guy leaves, he's like, I don't know, he makes up this whole entire thing about butchers and people rioting. I don't know. Did you get that whole thing?
It was basically just there was a bunch of plundering people because everybody's in a panic.
Yeah, but then he talked about like the butcher, and I don't even know what was the whole thing.
I don't remember.
Whatever. People are getting desperate, so but he decides that he's going to burn his orders.
He burns his orders and tells everybody to take off their uniforms, and they're going to burn those too.
Yep, he is through with the Nazis once and for all. He burns his orders. He has his wife go up and get like regular clothes, and he has everybody shed their military uniforms.
And then he looks so different out of uniform.
Yeah.
I was like, what?
But then, in a change of fate, the next day, we see that military vehicles are once again coming into the refugee castle, and then we see that it is the American soldiers looking for an American headquarters.
No.
So they welcome them in with open arms.
Mm-hmm.
They ask where the count is, and they said that he's like a prisoner of war. It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
The colonel asks the American general, which is funny because they have no idea that really he's the highest ranking German person right now, but whatever, because he had burnt his orders. The colonel asks the American general for help protecting his Spanish school and the mayors, but he's denied because there's still war going on. So this dude is still just trying to protect these horses.
I think it's so weird that they had like militarized the riding school to begin with, like because it wasn't in the beginning, and then it was, and then like why would you militarize a riding school anyway?
Yeah, I have no idea. So later on, the American soldiers come to the colonel with an idea that even though it's short notice, but if they do a performance for General Patton, who is coming,
and he's a huge horse lover.
Yep, he rode in the Olympics however many years ago.
Just like our main guy.
Yep, that may sway him into helping the riding school. So like they're like, if you put a performance for General Patton, we will help us stand a chance here. but they do not have a lot of time to prepare for this performance. They're like, it's impossible, but they've come too far to give up. The colonel gives another rousing speech, taking the chances that's all they have. They practice day and night. General Patton arrives, and then they end up getting everybody together, and they do this whole performance. I think it's crazy that like the biggest thing that they do is like the horses walk like diagonally. It's just
Yeah, I don't know. Seeing lots of horse shows. I don't think I've ever seen
the horses just like walk diagonally.
some of the things that they did there.
Mm.
I was like, okay.
So they do this whole performance for like led by the colonel for General Patton, but Patton just sits there emotionless. He doesn't give them any sort of reaction, but at the end he stands up and salutes them. The colonel asks Patton for his special protection for the school and the mayors that are in Czechoslovakia, but Patton doesn't give him an answer. Everyone's like, "Oh, he didn't give me an answer."
He says something to him, and then you see that it goes to the wife, and the countess sitting there, and she was like, "Wait, I missed it. Did he say yes or no?" And she's like, "He didn't."
Yeah, he doesn't give anybody an answer.
Like, he was asked several times, and like each time he just like never gives an answer. He just changes the subject. I'm hungry, and then they're like, "Well, what did he say?" "Oh, he's hungry."
Yeah. But then he goes inside.
My horses are at risk of like dying out. This guy's hungry.
Oh yeah, he throws this like big fit about him. He's like, oh, it's a whole thing. But so he goes inside to talk to his men, and this is where Patton says that there's a large amount of prisoners across the border from Czechoslovakia, so they may be able to do them both at the same time and bring the horses back at the same time.
Yeah.
This is where that we were talking about. The colonel is quite upset, and he's venting. This is when the member of the army comes in to say that the rider school is now under the protection of the U.S. Army on orders of General Patton, and they got their wish. But then so they're all eating like their whatever food or whatever at night, and then a German military officer comes to discuss. Like was
Captain
sent.
Danoff.
Hey, Captain Danoff was sent for by the U.S. military, and he comes in. And it's like a big conversation about talking about mutual benefit, that they're going to liberate all the prisoners. All that they need is the German military to surrender, and then them and their wives will be brought back home safe from the Soviets as American war prisoners. And that's what Operation Cowboy, which we discussed in the beginning, was. Does that make sense? Did I get that correct?
Yeah.
So basically, they had to surrender, and then they'll be safe from Soviets. And then we'll get our people.
Yes, but he strategically doesn't say anything about the horses at all.
That's true.
So the Germans have no idea. So they have no leverage.
It's true. I didn't pick up, but that makes sense.
Yes.
So the terms seem to be accepted, but then the American troops, the Allied troops are advancing, but they then get ambushed because their plan had leaked.
Well, I guess an insubordinate SS troop fled not long after the German captain went to go make the deal, and told other people. So when the Americans were going, they ended up getting attacked. And he was like, "Oh, it was like they knew we were coming." So it's kind of like, do we trust these people?
Yeah. So it's not.
Did we get set up?
We don't know yet that it was like a rogue troop. Basically,
they keep going through the city, but they're super high alert after that, and they come up on, I don't know, it kind of looked like a church or something, and all the German troops were standing there in front of it, and all their rifles and stuff were in piles in front of them, and then the American general asks so we were attacked, like what? And he was like, "Yeah, apparently when I left to make the deal with you, one of our
hostile
troops was insubordinate and left, and apparently told, but that was not in my control. I'm sorry."
Correct. And then they do surrender.
Yeah.
And they are promised to return for safety. We then cut to them seeing that they are freeing the American prisoners. There's a big celebration. They are able to find and free the mayors, and they decided that they're going to take all the horses. They end up liberating 1,000 horses.
Well, they had to take all the horses because all the horses were intermingled together. So
they can't just take.
and then that's why the German captain was like, "Well, if you would have told me this last night and I would have had time, I could have separated the ones you wanted." And he was like, "Oh, but you didn't want me to know that to have a bargaining piece." And he was like, "Exactly.
Yeah.
We'll just take them all."
So they end up liberating the 1,000 horses. It's right here where one of the U.S. military or one of the some military person says, "Well, sir, this is a war story that we could tell our grandchildren about."
Yeah.
So they're on their way back. The colonel finally.
But it was also funny because they were like, and can you imagine the grandchildren being like, "Yeah, you should have heard this like story that Grandpa told last night." Like, like nobody's gonna believe this.
So they are making their way back. The colonel finally sees his horses. Yeah. The horses arrive at the castle, and it's too much celebration.
Tell the boys the girlfriends are on the way.
That's right. It then cuts to the year 1955, so the war is long over, and it is the 220th anniversary of the riding hall, and the riding school does a grand performance. So like rousing applause. The colonel is the one leading it, and then in the audience, all of the people in attendance are down telling their grandchildren about how they helped save the battle to save these horses. So what they had said earlier came true. And that's the end. Anything that I missed about this Nazi war film?
No. Would you like to know some trivias?
Yeah, please.
So George S. Patton, the American general, actually did spend a lifetime with horses. He played polo, fox hunted, and competed in mounted steeplechases. He was also, like they said, a participant in the first modern pentathlon at the 1912 Olympics in Stockholm, Sweden. He placed 6th out of 23 equestrians. And then the equestrian performances of this film were choreographed by the real Colonel Podesky. How you say?
Yeah, I just kept referring to him as the Colonel.
Okay, well, he really choreographed what they were doing. And then Colonel Charles Reed of the 2nd Cavalry placed a huge role in saving not only the Spanish riding school, but a larger number of Arabian stallions in Czechoslovakia, reputing to be more responsible than George S. Patton by taking action in the field. He served as a technical advisor on the film and has a cameo eating oatmeal when a report comes in about the horses.
Really?
I thought that was kind of cool. And then the St. Martin location where they kept the stallions after the evacuation at Hermes Villa was a palace in the Lenzier Terrace Garden in Vienna, a former hunting area for the Habsburg nobility during the post-World War II Russian occupation of Vienna from 1945 to 1955. The villa was looted by the Soviets, became run down, and remained in poor condition for a number of years. But in 1963, this movie brought back the interest in the building, and it led to private innovations and motivated the Austrian authorities to renovate the villa.
Really?
Yeah, and it was in renovation processes from 1968 to 1974.
So that's actually after this film came out, yeah?
Yeah, so they redid it. And then there was a few goofs in the movies that I thought was interesting. So the SS stopped wearing the black uniform after 1938, and the events of this movie took place during 1945. So they were not wearing technically the correct uniform color. And then white stallions are already safe. It was the mares that are rescued.
Oh yeah, the Miracle of the White Stallion. Yeah.
So
interesting. So, what did you rate this film?
I gave it a 7 out of 10.
Okay, what did IMDb give it?
6.5 out of 10.
Well, you are all being incredibly gracious because I would have given it a much lower score than that. But before I dive into that, did this?
I love a good war movie.
Well, did this war air raid nonsense
No.
film burst its way onto your list upon a star?
It did not.
Well, then what is your list upon a star?
All right. So my list upon a star is 101 Dalmatians, The Parent Trap, Sleeping Beauty, Dumbo, Lady and the Tramp, The Three Caballeros, Moon Pilot, The Shaggy Dog, Peter Pan, and Alice in Wonderland. What about you? Does it make your list?
No, look.
Oh, it didn't gallop onto your
No.
list.
Look, I like war films too. There's a film that I talk about every day of my life that I love so much. It's not Disney, so I won't say what it is, but it is 3 hours long and I love it to death. And it's a war film, and actually it's about World War II too, conveniently. And I could watch that all day. But goodness gracious, no, I did not like this film that much. So my list upon a star is 101 Dalmatians, Peter Pan, Alice in Wonderland, Babes in Toyland, Pinocchio, The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Sleeping Beauty, Lady and the Tramp, and lastly, The Swiss Family Robinson. So yes, this is a film that happened. Lots of Nazi propaganda, like we were way back in the whatever in the single digits films with the victory through air power. But either way, we would love to hear your thoughts. We are on Spotify. We are on YouTube. If you're listening to it on one of those two things, thank you. Leave us a comment. We, of course, are on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
Give us a follow on Instagram. Make me be more present on there. And we have an email, deepdiveinthemagicpod@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. We would love to hear if this is your favorite film. We would love to hear if you've ever heard of this film before or Operation Cowboy in general. But either way, our next film, we're staying in 1963. We are moving over to July of this year, and it is the 65th feature-length film, and it is actually another sequel of a film that we've watched so far, and that film is called Savage Sam. Have you heard of it? Are you ready for it? We'll talk about it then.
Thanks for deep diving the magic.
Bye.
Bye.